Today we will look at another key to success, investing. We will examine why do successful people invest, what's the best way to invest, and before we invest, what do we need to look out for? Welcome to the Rodney Podcast. Back some time when I was working as a real estate agent in Sacramento years ago, there was an area that was on my radar. It was an area with a lot of condos. It was kind of like townhomes, condos, very small ones though, low income, drug infested area. And so that's a bad combo when you have the two mixed together, because in my opinion, low opinion works in a lot of different areas, but the low income and the drug infested together was a bad combo. And so few of us had people who were there either buying or selling, trying to get rid of their properties. And at one point, it just became so bad that the city had just made one entrance and one exit in the whole area. They kind of fenced it off, right? Bad sign. But as I was looking at the area, I saw they were selling properties that were down to 25,000 when before, just years before, they were about 150, 125. And so I thought 25 was pretty darn low. I mean, I could probably negotiate some of those to 15 if I needed to. So I told my friends and colleagues, I've said, you know what? We need to go in together and buy a ton of them. And I said, even if we just boarded them up for a while, we can still make money because they are so low, so cheap. I mean, if we rented it out for a few $100, I mean, it still would pay off because we would pay off that 25 grand and they would have a property there that's going to be worth something. And so nobody moved on it. I didn't even move on it. But about 5 years later, I had already moved on to a different office, a different area. I had moved. And so I was coming back, visiting my colleagues, just saying, hey, because I was in town. And I found out later because somebody told me, they came up to me, they said, Rodney, he said, man, my biggest regret is not listening to you. He said, do you know the city came to that area and they took it over, but they gave everybody who owned a property there about $100,000 for each property? So I was amazed. I said, I kind of told you that. My regret is I didn't do it myself. You see, had I bought about $250,000 worth of them, and I made the payments, even if I just boarded them up and didn't rent them and I just did everything I could to make the payments, those 10 units would have been worth $1 million. And I could have even maybe had a little bit more than 10 units if I had negotiated some of them down from 25K to 15 or even 20. But that profit would have been at least $750,000 profit. That's why I love real estate. Anyway, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about investing. So welcome to the Rodney Podcast.
Hey, this is Chance. My IG tag is at Chance_AK_Phillips. I've overcome addiction and changed my life. However, two things I'll never change is my love for God and the Rodney O Podcast, where you can hear stories like mine and other relevant topics. Stay tuned. This is the Rodney O Podcast.
Today's podcast is being recorded in February of 2019 and is part of a daily month-long series. That's right, 28 different podcasts for every day of February. It's called Keys to Success. And today's key is invest, or investing. And so today's podcast topic is the first one so far that I've done that kind of focuses on money as far as this key to success is. I mean, up to this point, and for most of the series, I kind of define success in terms of, other things besides being rich, And some may have this as a goal, that their idea of success is having lots of money and chasing money. And I think that money in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be happy. You can be happier maybe than you are now, but it doesn't necessarily bring you happiness. And so when I talk about success, I'm talking about in all areas of life and not just money. But that's a topic for a different day. You see, right now we live at a time where we have a greater divide between the people who have and the people who have not. It seems like the rich are getting richer and the poor become poorer. You kind of hear that all the time. And this may be due to the mindset and the thought process. For me, thinking back at those condos, I didn't buy those condos because I was stuck on this mindset that I'm broke, But had I begged, borrowed, and not steal, but had I begged and borrowed, maybe sell my house, sell cars or whatever, just scraped up the money, I would have been suffering for the short term, but I would have had money for the long term. I would have made $1 million after the city took them over. It is how the rich people think. Starve now, you eat well the rest of your life. Okay, right now we also live in a time where people can't retire. I see this a lot with pastors, and I see this a lot because the stock market crashes. You invest in it and it goes up and up, but then it just crashes way down. Then you got to climb back up again. I see low returns on savings. Putting your money in a savings account is not going to bring a huge return. Some people are relying on SSI to retire. Like they keep paying into it and they're relying on that for them to retire. We live check to check. All these things contribute to people not being able to retire. Some of us even borrow against our 401k, right? Because we want that vacation or that trip or that house. And so another thing, we live in a time where SSI may not make it. It kind of makes you feel good about paying into it every single check, right? I mean, the government can't even help us by staying open. Like they close, and we depend on them to send us a check every month. Well, good luck with that. So what do we do? What do you do so we don't fall into this trap? I think we all need to invest. And so we think like, what's stopping us from doing this? What's stopping us from investing? One of the key things is we don't know how. This is where daily learning comes into play. And if you haven't heard that podcast, I do have a podcast about daily learning. Educate yourself a lot. And I emphasize a lot so you don't fall into a scam that may come by, an investment scam. On the other side of that, we are skeptical at every turn because not everything is a scam. But the way to decide what is and what's not is by learning. Experience too, but I hope you don't get into an experience where you get ripped off because that's a horrible way to learn a lesson. But by learning, what you're doing will help you make an educated decision. And sometimes your gut makes that decision too. Sometimes what do you feel inside will kind of determine which way to go. My dad years ago, he was refinancing his house. And he had this gut feeling at the last minute that something just didn't set right with him. And so I went ahead and I kind of looked over his paperwork because he asked me to. And after looking over his paperwork, we found that the loan was what they call a negatively amortized loan, which means his payment required was not the full payment, and his loan was going to go higher and higher. So if he borrowed $200,000, it would go higher and higher until 5 years later, they would ask for the whole balance at once, and he would have to refinance again or lose his house or come up with the money. Horrible. His gut was right. People weren't forthcoming. So another thing that we live in this day and age is we fall for the easy, get rich quick schemes, right? Because, look, there is no easy, no-brainer decisions. It's all hard work and educated long-term. It's the best way to go, and it's what successful people do. And so if you hear that, really examine if they say there's guaranteed, or you say you're always going to make money, or just go ahead and do it. Don't ask questions. Beware. Please beware. Then also, we kind of play it too safe sometimes, way too safe. We don't invest because we want that nest egg, right? But guess what? You know what? I've seen this happen. Like you save up and you invest, you retire, and you have this nest egg, and you didn't continue to invest it. You use it as your retirement, like it's paying you monthly. Guess what? That's going to happen. Guaranteed 100%, it will go to a balance of 0 sometime. And you always underestimate, right? Like inflation and expenses, it's always more than you planned, 20, 30, 15 years prior when you were planning your retirement budget. But see, when you invest, when you're educated in investing, then the worst case scenario of something, let's say a piece of property, right? The absolute worst case scenario is that the property is worth nothing. It's worthless. You got to tear it down. But the land, right? In real estate, we have a term. Land does not depreciate. The land is still worth something. So you still have at least something. That's worst case scenario. One scenario with the nest egg that you just kind of withdraw monthly from to live off for 5, 7, 10 years, that will go to 0. On the other hand, investing in something, in a piece of property where you have people rent it out, they're paying you monthly. That monthly payment's used to pay the balance down. The value of the property increases also. It's usually a win-win. And I say usually because there is things that go wrong. But one, 100% 0. The other, high chance you get lifelong returns. And so here's the truth. Financially successful people have learned how to invest properly, setting them up for passive income and a secure future and more wealth for their life. So how to get in on this? What steps do you take? Well, first you got to read. Read about investing. This goes back to lifelong learning. Read about what you're doing. Find mentors or people with more experience than you. Find out what they're doing. Find out how they're investing. Find out, their ways. And then also last, find your balance between safe and risky. What are you comfortable with? What are you comfortable with doing? Some people are comfortable being really, really risky, and some are not. So, and lastly, remember to play the long game. Play the long game. Don't go for the short, easy money. Higher the risk, greater reward, but too much risk is probably no reward. So anyway, please feel free to dialogue with me. My YouTube video, Rodney O Weekly, shows that I am living what I speak. And so that vlog is up every week on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe to that channel. The link is in the podcast description, or you can simply go to YouTube and search Rodney O Weekly. Remember that I want to inspire, encourage, and motivate all of you as you navigate this journey that we call life. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next one.